let a few more wander in. Just like that whole thing of real movement of the spirit, something that the church has it's like getting back to some spiritual coffee. Okay, I think we constitute a group, I think, here. We are so pleased to have Madalyn here today and have this time for just some general Q&A. We're getting used to having the moderator here, I think, and this is just really great. And yet, I think it can be helpful I'd ask Madalyn to start with, some of us still think, the annual conference sets a date and the moderator shows up a week before and runs the business. And we all know that's not true, but it's easy to forget all the things that happen in the year connected to denominational staff, et cetera. So I thought we could start there, things you've done, and then probably move into where you've been and what you've been hearing. And we'll just open it up for your questions, what you want to know. Okay.
I might need your reminder about
all this stuff.
Yeah.
I will, and when you have a question, I'll bring you this mic.
Yeah, so the annual conference moderator is the highest elected position in the denomination. It's a 3-year term, and which Tim is well aware of. So your first year you serve as moderator-elect. You are technically an officer of the denomination at that point, but your main role is to support the current moderator. And then the gavel gets passed, and you become the moderator, and that's the busiest year. That's when you are not only serving as an officer of the denomination, but you're a member of the denominational leadership team. You're an ex officio member of the denominational board. You are part of Interagency Forum, which is a group of all of the agency executive directors and board chairs. And that's when you do the circuit and you speak at congregations like this one or at district conferences and delegate briefings. So this past fall, I was all over the country attending various district conferences and meeting with congregational leaders from all over the place. And then I had a little bit of break over the holidays, which was really nice because I'm working full-time at the same time. I'm not a pastor, so I'm working a full-time executive level job for a faith-based financial services company, and I travel a lot for that job too, so it was nice to have a break over the Thanksgiving and Christmas holidays. And now it's picking back up again. So this spring I'm speaking at a number of congregations and some district delegate briefings as they prepare to send their delegates to annual conference. And that then will lead up to, as Jim mentioned, the week before annual conference, which is when our standing committee, which is another denominational board-like group, that they're the ones who determine what items of business get in front of the delegates. That committee will meet, and the moderator chairs that committee. And then at the end of annual conference, I will happily be passing the gavel to our current moderator-elect, Dava Hensley. And as immediate past moderator, so that's the 3rd year of the term, there are a handful of responsibilities that the immediate past moderator has to help with transitions and institutional knowledge and that sort of thing. And then I'll be done. So Tim's almost done.
So, as you've made your way around to district conferences, what are people talking about? What are they hoping for? What are they yearning about? What are they fill in the blank?
Yeah. That's a really good question. I think there's been a lot of disruption in the life of the denomination recently, a lot of challenges and hurt feelings, and I think I get a sense that most people want to get back to or be reminded what it means to be part of a church community again, both locally and nationally. And so I've actually heard lots of comments of hope in the midst of lament, but a lot of hope, which actually is very encouraging.
Okay, Nan.
Thanks. I'm wondering if you can give us any further look into the Puerto Rican district, the mass exodus, and the fact that the Church of the Brethren was not invited to try to mitigate that situation, but the CBC sure seemed to be there. That's disturbing.
Yeah, we're really grieving the loss of our Puerto Rico district. For those of you who did not read the special edition of Newsline, all 6 of our Church of the Brethren congregations in Puerto Rico have chosen to leave, and all 6 have chosen to join the Covenant Brethren Church. And yeah, that's been a challenging situation, and I think it was one thing on top of many, a million little paper cuts that people of color in the denomination have felt for years and years and years. And traditionally, the Hispanic and Latino cultures do view LGBTQIA inclusion a little bit more conservatively than perhaps other cultures, and we know that has been a strong issue for some in the church. In relation to the perception that the Church of the Brethren was not invited, I believe that there was some miscommunication between Puerto Rico and the denominational leadership on that, but unfortunately it did mean that we did not have denominational leadership represented at their district conference, which is when they then informed us that they had chosen to leave. So we're still trying to work out some questions and clarify some things with them, and we wish them well. We hope that that their following of how they feel that the Spirit was moving them is fruitful for them. We don't have any ill will towards them, but we are very sad.
Rachel.
I know it's pretty customary for the moderator to make at least one out-of-the-country trip, and if you've done that, I'm not aware of it, but are you going to? And if so, where?
Yes, so I am. I haven't done it yet. In the recent past, the moderator's international trip has typically happened in January or February, but to accommodate my husband's schedule, we're actually going in the beginning of April, and we are going to be visiting our partners in India. So I'm very much looking forward to that.
Like we here at the church, at Manchester Church, really want to be welcoming, but as you can tell, we're looking a little pale here. What are some things we can do to be more welcoming?
Well, one thing that you might want to consider doing is reaching out to the university. The university has a very high percentage of students of color, many of whom did not grow up in Indiana. And so they're far away from home. They're in likely a much smaller community than they're accustomed to. And things that we might take for granted are not available for them in North Manchester. So for example, African American students have to travel to Fort Wayne to get their hair cut because it takes a specific skill set and understanding of African American hair. And so that's just one very small example, but maybe reaching out to the student life staff at Manchester and seeing if there's ways that the congregation can support the students of color on campus and help them feel welcomed and that this is part of their community as well. That'd be one suggestion. I'm also on the Manchester Board of Trustees, so full disclosure.
Well, you said, you know, the hair, it's one small thing, but is it?
Right.
And, yeah, and just like Puerto Rico, a number of small things add up. Yeah,
Yes.
Thank you for that. Another question. Paul.
Thank you for giving up yourself, you know, to do this work. I'm also interested in how your insights have changed, and you can be as specific or general as you want to. But what have you learned about our denomination that you didn't know about before, and what does that mean to you?
I realized I didn't know nearly as much as I thought I did. I have been involved in the denomination for a number of years. I served as board chair for On Earth Peace for 5 years and was on their board for a total of 9 years. I've done other things related to the denomination. So when I was elected, I thought, okay, I know generally what's going on. And then I attended my first annual conference officers meeting. Tim remembers, and I was like, I don't know what's going on. So I can't point to something specific, but just more of the breadth of everything, and yeah, and just continuing to learn as I go. I'm kind of like Gamache that way.
Yeah.
I don't think you've spoken to this. I came in just slightly late. What's annual conference going to be like this year? Is there going to be controversy? Do you know are you aware of what's coming in terms of what you call it, queries and stuff like that? What do you think it's
we're
gonna
not
be
quite
like?
ready to talk at length about the business items. We're working on finalizing all the various pieces so that we can put it into the conference booklet, and then I'll be working on delegate briefing video for districts and congregations that want to utilize the video resource as opposed to having me speak to them in person. So I encourage you to watch that video when it's available. But there is at least one query coming. It was passed by the Illinois-Wisconsin District related to the 1983 Statement on Human Sexuality. And their query essentially is asking or suggesting that the denomination allow decisions around human sexuality to be taken at the congregational level. So we'll see. We'll see what kind of conversations we get.
And asking if there'll be controversy is like asking, will people eat ice cream at annual conference? Yeah, yeah.
So, as you know, Madalyn, one of our big challenges is convincing members of the church to take on these volunteer leadership roles. As you said a little earlier, you're doing this hugely important and time-consuming job while working full-time at an executive level position. What can the church do so that we can make it more possible for people to work full-time and to take on roles like this? I'm guessing you never sleep. That's the only way I know how you're doing it.
Do you see the bags under my eyes?
So how can, because we can't continue to rely on people who are retired and have lots of time available to do this important work.
Yeah, I think, and I have to give Tim some credit here too. When I was elected, he really pushed the Program and Arrangements Committee and denominational staff to remember that we needed to be more accommodating in when and where and how we meet, because I am not a pastor and I'm not retired. So thank you for that. That has helped. I think the denomination is taking some steps already. more of the annual conference officer and leadership team meetings are happening over Zoom, and not so much full day meetings, but 2 or 3 hour chunks here and there, which has been helpful for me. I'm able to still be present at work and fit in the necessary denominational meetings as possible, and not have to drive to Elgin and have overnights, extended overnights. So that's been useful. It also means that we can meet in the evenings if needed, which is helpful and could be beneficial for anyone who might be called and elected to a denominational position who does not have the flexibility during the workday that I would and could only meet in the evenings. So when we think about accessibility to denominational participation, those are some of the things to consider. I haven't talked about this with denominational leadership yet, though, but I think we might also want to revisit the scope of some of the roles. Tim, the moderator position is essentially another full-time job that is unpaid and there's no assistant. And that's a lot. It's a lot. So it's been fulfilling, but again, if we want to get people with different experiences and perspectives and who are also in different life situations to be willing to stick their neck out to serve the church in this way, we might want to reconsider what is the responsibility of an elected officer versus what is the responsibility of staff.
Do you know Andrew Sampson? Do you know? Okay. I was struck by his recent post that he got a Dear John letter from the nominating committee. I did too. I'm 0 for 3. I'm being nominated for this or that or the other. Thanks, but no thanks. And which sometimes is a relief, But he says, I'm 0 for 7. Come on now. He says, that's it. I'm done putting forth my name. And you do hear that some. It feels like people, move from this position to another perhaps because of name recognition. I don't know. But I wonder sometimes about that. It's tough to be on the nominating committee, and they're always saying, now, put your name in. John Millibaby said, we need more people of color. Talk to your Lower Miami folks. You have a congregation that's half black. Get their names in there. I just wonder sometimes about our whole process.
Yeah, that's a really important observation, and the standing committee actually has had some conversations around whether or not it's time for them to reimagine our nomination process. I know that it can be a challenge for people who aren't involved in that process to understand the breadth of what they have to consider in order to even just whittle it down to 2 people per position for the ballot. But there's all these rules that are written into our denominational polity about how many nominations are needed in order to have a good sample of the denomination for the standing committee to then further hone who's going to be on the ballot. And our denomination is not as large as it used to be, so it might be time. It might be time for the standing committee to reimagine that nomination process and maybe even reimagine how the ballot is presented. I've heard some people wonder, is it time to move to a slate rather than a runoff vote? So I don't know, but it is something that the standing committee has been talking about. But it's not as simple as just saying, oh yeah, this year we're going to do it a little bit differently.
Well, Madalyn, at annual conference last summer, there was a committee nominated to talk about those very things, right? Are they going to give a report this year? Do you know?
There's going to be a subcommittee report that they're bringing to standing committee this summer. But there's also, at this year's annual conference is going to be discussion about the next review and evaluations process. So some of that might end up getting rolled into one.
I'm sorry if I've missed what's been happening about the splitting of the church, but it seems to a certain extent that we're kind of ignoring it, that they're gone, so now we'll just move on. And I know for some people it feels like a relief. For some people it feels like something we should be sorry about. I'm wondering if the church needs to do some grieving. The fact that we weren't able to solve the differences that, the churches have split in some ways. Some, there are people we know and love who are gone, that we weren't able to solve our differences, that, do we need to acknowledge what has happened? Do we need to do more as a denomination to say we weren't successful and that we've lost people?
Yes, and we've been talking already about ways that we can incorporate some of that time for grief and lament at annual conference. So watch for that. I think also it's not done. And so it's hard for denominational leadership to know what to say, because there are still individuals and churches that are in the process of discerning if they're going to leave. But yes, we've been talking about it, and we're hoping to provide some space for some time of grief and naming of pains, not just related to a split in the denomination, but the ways that we've hurt others and hurt each other in the denomination.
Follow up on that. Can't be easy being denominational staff right now.
Oh, it is not easy to be denominational staff right now.
Well, how are they doing?
They're trying their best, everyone has an opinion, and they're trying their best to serve a church that has, the spectrum of viewpoints and spectrum of opinions and ideas and understandings of what's happening, and anything that you can do to express your support of them, I know that they would be appreciative.
In your sermon today, you talked a little bit about how being with the other musicians gave you that common sense of community because of what you were creating and doing together. And in the light of that, your racial background, cultural differences, those things were kind of put aside. And I actually wrote that down because I thought, well, that's one of our visions for going forward, is finding that common element, that common work, that where the things that need to be put aside for the moment, we can still find community. So I know that's a airy-fairy idea that is hard to actually put into action, but I think it will help me think about specific actions and just be part of that vision.
Thank you. Yeah, it can feel really overwhelming, but every little step that we can take is helpful.
Lynn.
If you look at the history of the Church of the Brethren in the last 200 years, there have been a lot of branches that have split off. Mm-hmm. Is this branching different than the branching that went on then? Or is it new, just another example of the kind of differences in philosophy which people have in a religion? And also, is this kind of splitting off common in other Protestant denominations, and even Catholic denominations?
I would say, to answer your first question, it is both familiar and new. I think, if I'm remembering correctly, I could be wrong, but I think before the Covenant Brethren Church. Our most recent split may have been when the Brethren Church, Ashland, Ohio, denomination split from the Church of the Brethren. And that was over theological differences of opinion. At that point, the Ashland Brethren were a little bit more progressive than the Church of the Brethren, and theologically that's changed since then. I think whether I'm trying not to be overly critical here. The Covenant Brethren have very strong feelings about one particular issue and the theological differences on that particular issue, and that in and of itself might be a little bit different than what we've experienced in the past. LGBTQ inclusion. But we are not an outlier. There are many other denominations that are experiencing very similar shifts in their numbers and in their relationships. I work for an institution that was founded by the Mennonites, and Mennonite Church USA has been experiencing fractures around these same theological issues for the past decade or more. Mennonite Church USA used to be larger than the Church of the Brethren. They are no longer larger than the Church of the Brethren, haven't been for a handful of years. I know the United Methodists have recently had a huge split related to the same topic. There are many, many others. So I think we could point our finger and say this is all because of this one divisive issue, but I think that would be shortchanging the discussion a bit. I think people in general are doing church differently, and they're living out their faith differently. When you look at statistics from research of religious attitudes in the US, the percentage of individuals who are saying that they are spiritual but not religious continues to increase. And church attendance was already declining before the pandemic, and it has not completely bounced back since the pandemic. So I think some of this is also just shifting in experiences that people are looking for related to their faith journeys as well.
Madalyn over here. You talked briefly about the Puerto Rican church. And in Africa, one of the things that's happening is the conservativeness of many African churches, both United Methodists and others. All of that's happening. What do you see happening with the Nigerian church in relation to this whole thing about sexuality and how they interpret and need for their communities?
Well, for one, the Church of the Brethren in the U.S., the leadership has really emphasized with all of our international brothers and sisters that theological differences that they may have with what the Nigerians would call the mother church are not mandates. We are not mandating that other international bodies of the Church of the Brethren believe the same thing. That we are partners now, and we are siblings. Now, culturally, the Nigerians, EYN, they call us the mother church. They're very respectful and celebrate that shared connection. But in reality, we're not a governing body for them. We are independent but related bodies of the Brethren movement. Tim and I had a chance to visit with leaders from EYN at this last annual conference, and they were expressing how much they love the Church of the Brethren US and how much they want to support us, and that they are sad to see that our numbers are declining. They want us to thrive, and they were asking us, how can we help the church in the US thrive? How can we help the church in the US grow? Because we love you, and we want to support you. So our relationship with EYN is very strong, and they're very valued partners. Maybe Tim should answer that question. He got a kick out of some of their reactions. They actually were, they had met Tim. He had gone to Nigeria for their celebration, their anniversary celebration. And so they were so excited to see him again and so pleased to be in the US and at our annual conference. And then they were introduced to me. And I think they assumed I was a lot younger than I actually am, but they were thrilled. Jim, maybe you should have Tim tell this story.
Tim?
That's the first thing that crossed my mind when Bud mentioned the EYN gathering, because the women who were at that gathering at annual conference last year, from the representatives from EYN, when they had a chance to meet Madalyn, it was inspiring to them to see a woman, moderator-elect, soon to be moderator, but they just couldn't get over how young Madalyn is. And the words they used were things like an inspiration to all of our church, but especially for our women, for us to go back and tell them, you know, you too can one day be a leader of your congregation, of this whole denomination in Nigeria, because look what they're doing at, as you said, the mother church. Jim, the answer that we at least tried to provide to that invitation from EYN leadership about how can we help was I felt personally that we only had a very partial reply, mostly because, as I think most of us know, the church in Nigeria is just exploding. I mean, it is growing at incredible pace, and that's true in other parts of the African continent as well. The only thing that I remember from that conversation was that the ways they talked about how their congregation, their denomination is growing in Nigeria is very different than the way church growth has happened in the U.S., especially within a little sect like ours, where they have been much more dedicated and devoted to door-to-door almost kind of evangelism. And, you know, one of our founders, Alexander Mack, was asked when we were first beginning, are we going to do that, proselytizing? And the answer from Mack and others was that no, we're not, and the way that people will join us, and that famous phrase, by the manner of our living. So we talked about just different ways to be the church and how those have a tremendously different impact on how churches grow in these very, very different countries and cultures. I don't know. That's what I remember.
Yeah, that's what I remember as well. I think, again, kind of tying back to how people are doing church differently and they're experiencing their faith journeys differently, we have a lot to offer. There is so much about our historic brethren beliefs and values that appeal to so many people who aren't even familiar with Brethren or other Anabaptist groups. And they're looking for communities where they can live out those values. We need to be willing to tell our story and to demonstrate how we live and welcome new ideas and new ways of being church so that new people will recognize who we are and say, oh, I think those are my people. That's just my take.
Yes, I'm wondering about, we talked this morning about the Puerto Rico decision, while at the same time, something that's I find very interesting and kind of exciting is the way the Church of the Brethren is starting in cooperation with faith communities in Brazil and Venezuela and Spain and other places in Africa. I know we've been a long time associated with India and Nigeria, but these other shoots or new starts, how is that working, and are they experiencing this LGBT difference, or is that not affecting
those relationships?
Yeah, I mean, I think the new partnerships that are coming up are due to relationships that we've made and intentional relationship building that the denomination has put effort into. Yes, the LGBTQ discussion is filtering into those spaces as well. It's not just a denominational conversation, it's a societal one, and so it does mean that it is filtering into those relationships and those conversations as well.
It seems to me that one thing we haven't maybe focused on as much, at least in our discussion this morning, is about the generational trends that we're seeing, that there are older people averaging, the age is older in most Protestant denominations. That trend about more spiritual, not religious, which seems to be also a generational thing. How do we adapt to that?
If I had the magic answer to that,
I was going to say that's the last question.
I don't know how we counter that and fix that, but there are many reasons why people are leaving the church or choosing not to attend regularly. There's a lot of reasons why people are saying that they're spiritual but not religious, but one of the major reasons that is often cited in these research studies is because the younger generations don't see church institutions actually practicing what they preach, and they find that hypocritical. And they're aware of systemic biases and old norms that maybe don't serve the community well anymore, but they don't see anyone doing anything to fix it. And they want to fix it all, but they're choosing where they're going to put their energy to fix it. And I think they've started to lose faith in church institutions. So one thing I would suggest is for us to really dig deep. And what are some cultural norms, cultural meaning like brethren, Anglo brethren cultural norms that aren't serving us anymore? And that's hard. That's hard work for any institution, much less the people in that institution to do. But if we approach it from a stance of curiosity and learning and wanting to better understand in order to improve, we might be able to identify some things that we can fix or change.
I feel for you, both in your role as a member of the Board of Trustees at Manchester and now in this office. The responsibility that comes for thinking about the institution as opposed to the work. But I want to ask you, because you have this position now of seeing a lot of the work, where you see, rather than thinking about growth, vitality. What are some projects that you've learned in this past year that inspire you?
You know what really inspires me is the denomination, ever since they've completed their compelling vision process, they've been inviting congregations to share their stories of how they're being or seeing Jesus in the neighborhood. And some of those stories are being shared in the Metzger magazine. Some of them are shared through video content that we have at annual conference. Those are the stories that really give me a lot of hope and meaning for our denomination, because that's us living out our faith. And if you've not been watching for those stories, I really encourage you to. There are some of the video stories on the annual conference webpage that you can go and watch today, or you, flip through some previous issues of Messenger and see some of the stories that have been shared there. That's what's giving me hope, and what I think is truly the work of the church. that's actually happening. I hope that answered your question, Katie. No, we'll follow up with me, yeah.
Back to the question about the university. I know they've cut a lot of staff there. Is there a staff person working on multicultural students? Like in the past, we've had connections. We used to have an international potluck once a month with international students, but who would we talk to on campus if we wanted to connect?
Yeah, there is a, I forget his actual title and his name, sadly. Rudy, yes. And what is his title again? Yes, I think so. That was what I was leaning towards, or intercultural or something like that. Yeah, so Rudy is the new-ish director of multicultural affairs. He's been in that role at least for a year, maybe longer, and he has a lot of energy and has been working with students and with cabinet members, and yeah, so I would, if you haven't met him yet, I would encourage you to seek him out and get to know him.
There's a lot of talk in the church about how to get the younger generations involved, how to get more diverse people involved. What is the church doing to listen to those groups?
That's a really good question, too. Previous moderators have intentionally had times of conversation, like town hall style meetings with various groups. And the denomination has just hired a new director of intercultural ministries. And I'm pretty sure that announcement has been made. I'm pretty sure it's Funa Abedin, who is of Haitian background and a pastor, is going to be serving in that role. And I know the standing committee, both in relation to the nominations process, but also in conversations about their own makeup, have also been talking about what they might need to do differently in order to make sure that they are hearing all the voices. The compelling vision process that the denomination went through several years ago intentionally set up dialogue and listening opportunities across the denomination, and Gimbia Kettering, my friend that I mentioned in my sermon, was still in her role during part of that, and so she was intentionally working with her colleagues at the denomination to make sure that there were talking and listening sessions set up with communities of color. So yeah, I mean, it's not perfect. No process ever is. And our church institution is made up of fallible human beings, and so we're bound to make some missteps along the way, but we're also bound to learn. And I know that I don't represent every racial or ethnic group, but in my role, I try to lift up awareness and concerns as I'm able to. The Mission and Ministry Board has been having conversations with intercultural leaders across the denomination as well. So yeah, we're working at it, just in a lot of different ways.
We have time for a couple more. I have two. Well, shifting significantly. We were talking earlier of like covenant brethren, and maybe it's a little confusing for me. Is there still a Brethren Revival Fellowship? How is that different than the covenant brethren, and how are have there been conversations there?
So yes, there is still Brethren Revival Fellowship. They consider themselves an affinity group of sorts. I mean, that might not be the language that they would use, but an affinity group of more theologically conservative brethren. And so they still have affiliations with Church of the Brethren congregations, but now they also have some affiliations with Covenant Brethren congregations. And so in some ways they align well with some of the values of the CBC, but in other ways, some of them feel differently. And so there are Brethren Revival Fellowship congregations. I mean, they're not a governing body or anything, but Covenant Brethren has decided to become a denomination, whereas Brethren Revival Fellowship is an affinity group. So that's one of the differences.
Does Brethren Revival Fellowship still help with disaster relief work? Do you know?
Yes, they actually are very participative, in general, very participative in our Brethren disaster relief efforts.
How about Covenant Brethren?
What was that?
Covenant Brethren, do they?
Oh, that I'm not sure of.
Yeah.
It's been my understanding that not all of those churches that have left the Church of the Brethren have found a home in the Covenant Brethren. Is there any idea of what percentage people are in agreement or are finding a covenant group there that they can feel part of?
Yeah, so a number of the congregations that have left the Church of the Brethren have actually chosen to become independent and not be part of either denomination. And we actually were just talking about this with the Council of District Executives 3 weeks ago when we were in Florida for various meetings. And the denomination has been trying to keep statistics on congregations and what their status is. The Council of District Executives, they've been keeping their own records. So we're in the process of merging those records and double checking numbers to make sure that we're all on the same page. So I don't have those numbers right off the top of my head for you, but that is something that we're trying to keep track of.
I'd say we're pretty close to the end. Though maybe we can finish with a little, I'm going to call it testimony time. I know. As one, also a very shy 3- and 4-year-old to another, it's no small thing to say yes to this. And I imagine you contemplated it a while, had some conversations, but something said, sure, I'll do this. And part of it's got to be, I'm assume, a bit of a love for the church. But maybe there's more. What was the yes?
I waited until the very last possible minute to tell Standing Committee that they could consider me for the ballot. And that was even after they extended the deadline.
Is this where we turn the recording off? No.
I don't think it would come to anyone's surprise if they've been part of the denomination and following denominational life and business. I don't think it'd be a surprise to anyone to recall that when I was the board chair for On Earth Peace was also when On Earth Peace issued its statement of inclusion. And also when On Earth Peace was going through an executive director transition. So as board chair, I was the one up front at annual conference business, answering very tough questions and criticisms. So I did not go into this role with rose-colored glasses on. But the church that has hurt me is also the church that has loved me and has helped form me. And I have been one of those voices that's been saying if the church wants to not only be relevant, but thrive, that they need to be willing to invite people into the room that haven't historically been there. What I didn't realize was people would interpret that as being me. But, so as when I was informed that I had been nominated by more than one person, that felt like a movement of the Spirit that I needed to pay attention to. And as I considered and prayed about it, felt that I probably needed to practice what I preached and be willing to consider it, or at least be willing to see see what the delegate body thought. So that's how I got here.
And we're grateful. And you come with a very, a particular skill set, but I think even more, you come with a sense of self and integrity that is appreciated greatly. So thank you.
Thank you.
And thank you all for all your questions and being kind to Madalyn here. And we're so grateful that you took your time out to be with us. Thank you very much.
Thank you for having me.
I think we can go eat. Let's go eat.